Let us pray. Almighty God, who in thy infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us, thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in this federation. Let thy blessings descend upon us here in assembly gathered, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation, in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge. All which we ask in thy name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. House in session.
Confirmation of minutes. Messages from the Governor General. Announcements by the Speaker.
Just one announcement is just to indicate to the Parliament and the nation that this emergency sitting is as per the standing orders of the National Assembly, and more specifically under Standing Order 3, meetings, subsection 3, which says that provided that in case of any emergency of which the Speaker shall be the sole judge, a meeting of the National Assembly may be summoned on such shorter notice as he or she may determine, and such notice may be given to members by such means as the urgency of the case permits. So House is in session under a emergency sitting.
Presentation of papers and reports from committees. Petitions, questions, statements by ministers, personal explanations, motions.
Mr. Speaker, permit me to rise in this emergency session of the National Assembly. To speak on the agenda item motions and to bring to the attention of the National Assembly that His Excellency the Governor General, having received the report of the Boundaries Commission by the chairman of that commission, has converted that report into a draft proclamation which speaks to the boundaries as have been revised after several years and months of sitting of the Constituency Boundaries Commission. I would like for the record, Mr. Speaker, to look at the resolution and read the contents of the resolution into the minutes of this meeting. And then, of course, bring us to the proclamation as drafted by or through His Excellency the Governor General's office, facilitated, of course, by the normal means of the government, the Office of the Minister of Justice and also Legal Affairs, and the Attorney General's office, to have us today to debate this resolution in this Parliament. It reads, Resolution of the National Assembly of St. Kitts-Nevis, dated the 16th day of January 2015, pursuant to Section 50 of the Constitution of St. Kitts-Nevis. Whereas it is provided by Section 50, subsection 6 of the Constitution of St. Kitts-Nevis, that if any draft proclamation laid before the National Assembly pursuant to the provisions of subsection 3 or subsection 5 of Section 50 of the Constitution is approved by a resolution of the National Assembly, the Prime Minister shall submit it to the Governor General, who shall make a proclamation in terms of the draft, and that proclamation shall come into force upon the next dissolution of Parliament after it is made. And whereas a draft proclamation was laid before the National Assembly by the Prime Minister in accordance with the provisions of Section 50, subsection 3, on the 16th day of January 2015, and whereas the draft proclamation has been debated by the National Assembly, now be it resolved that this Honourable House approve the draft proclamation by resolution of this House. And it is expected, therefore, that this draft resolution would be approved in this Assembly today at the end of this sitting. Mr. Speaker, what really does this resolution speak to? As I said before, it speaks to the draft proclamation. And I want to read into the records of this National Assembly, again, the draft proclamation. It says, draft proclamation dated the 16th day of January 2015, to give effect to the recommendations of the Constituency Boundaries Commission in accordance with the provisions of Section 50 of the Constitution of St. Kitts-Nevis.
That is a breach of the rules. I mean, a little courtesy.
Member for number 7.
Rush to see an emergency.
Member for number 7, let me make it absolutely clear, not today. Not today. You will not dictate how this Parliament runs. You will not. I am speaking.
Nobody is
I am
dictating.
speaking. Shut up. Learn manners.
Mr. Speaker.
I am speaking. Shut up. Learn manners.
Speak to people.
Because
There's a proper way.
I am addressing you as honourable member, and you're still speaking. So it means you have no manners.
In how?
Not today. Not today. You will not dictate how this Parliament runs. The chair is responsible for that, and that's the end of that. What is your point about member for number 8?
Run by the rules.
Sit down. Member for number 7, if you do that again, I'll have you removed from the Parliament. Maybe that's your intention, right? I don't know what you'll get by it, but it'll just show that you have absolutely no manners and you need to get it. Let's go member for number 8.
Mr. Speaker, the resolution of order. Number 426, Mr. Speaker, signed by the officer and police officer. At 4:26 p.m. today, as signed by an officer, while at government headquarters, I got a notice for the meeting to be commenced at 4:15. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that it is highly unusual and highly improper for a member of this Parliament to get a notice after Parliament has begun. And so, Mr. Speaker, on that order, I'm urging the Speaker and this Parliament to stand down the sitting until proper notice has been given to members of this Parliament, Mr. Speaker.
Why are you here?
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I'm not finished.
Quiet, yes.
Mr. Speaker, I continue.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not finished.
Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, I have been in the Federation of St. Kitts-Nevis and have not traveled anywhere. And the usual notices for Parliament are delivered to me before Parliament commences.
As it
And I
should.
believe the public should understand that this seemed to be a way to get something before Parliament to be heard and debated without the members of Parliament being properly notified. And so, Mr. Speaker, since it is highly improper for people to get notice for meeting after meeting begins, then, Mr. Speaker, this meeting is not properly constituted.
Thank you, Member.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not finished. Mr. Speaker, because this meeting is not properly constituted, this meeting cannot proceed unless, Mr. Speaker, members of this Parliament have been properly notified.
Okay, Member for number 8, I want you to answer the seat, please. You're making the same point. Can you have a seat? Let me address that, please.
Please address it, Mr.
Thank you.
Speaker.
Right. As you say, it's not usual. It's not usual.
You agree with that? It's not usual.
The member for number 8 do not speak for me.
I'm asking, Mr. Speaker.
Do not ask.
Do not ask anything.
Allow me to finish and then you can ask me a question.
Okay, thank you.
Right? That modus operandi will not work today. What I'm saying is that you mentioned that it's usual to be notified at a particular time. This is not a usual parliament. This is an emergency sitting. Furthermore, your indication of the start time. We actually started beyond the time you got the notice. Okay? And in fact you're here. Let's move on with the people's business. Member for number 6. I have ruled on that. Let's move on, member for number 6. I have ruled on that. Unless you have I have ruled. Member for number 6, go ahead, please.
Mr. Speaker, I say rise.
So I continue.
Mr. Speaker.
I have addressed it. Member for number 8, I have addressed.
Address what, Mr. Speaker? You said I could ask you a question after you finish speaking. I'm standing to ask that question.
Whereas it is provided.
Hold on, member for number 6. Hold on, member for number 6. Member for number 8. Member for number 8.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Your antics and your behavior will not help you.
Don't describe my antics,
Okay?
Mr. Speaker.
Your antics and your behavior. Okay, member for number 6, let's go, please.
Mr.
Continue.
Speaker,
Mr. Speaker.
I rise on a point of order.
Member for number 6, let's go, please.
It is
I rise on a
provided.
point of order in this Parliament.
Member for number 6, continue.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
Member for number 6, go right ahead.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Of St.Kitts-Nevis.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising on a point
That the
of
Constituency
order.
Boundaries Commission shall, in accordance with the provisions of Section 50, review the number and boundaries of the constituencies
A point of order takes precedence.
into
Mr.
which
Speaker. I'm raising a point of order.
Mr.
Speaker.
Christopher and Nevis. Right.
Member for number
Mr.
6.
Speaker.
Have a seat,
I
have a seat,
rise on point of
have a seat,
order.
please. Have a seat. If you're going to stand and raise the same, if it's going to be a point of order on the same point, I've ruled on it already. So if it is, hold on, allow me to finish. If you're going to raise the same matter that I've just ruled on, forget it. So if you have a new point of order, then I'll listen to it. So go right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order as the elected member for St.Kitts-Nevis 7 for the record, and to say, Mr. Speaker, that I received, Mr. Speaker, a notice in the street here at 4:30 p.m. And on my way here, Mr. Speaker, I was debarred by a locked gate to this Parliament. And I am taking strong objection to that. There is a member here in the gallery, Mr. Speaker, who purported to raise a gun at me as I entered this Parliament. These are serious matters, Mr. Speaker. I am a member of the Parliament being ushered into an emergency sitting and members blocking my entrance into the Parliament. A locked gate downstairs impeded me coming into this so-called emergency sitting of Parliament. And we come here as officially elected members with a right to speak and a right to ask questions regarding this injustice. This has never happened in any other democratic society. Members being debarred, members being prevented from entering into the Parliament. These can be accepted as proper etiquette and proper behavior, and I share the very objection raised by the member for number 8. I call on all in civil society to take notice of this outrage.
Thank you.
I call on all citizens to come to Bastille and to take a stand and do what you can to preserve democracy. This injustice will not prevail. And it must not prevail.
Member for number 7. Thank you. Let's move on with the people's business.
Mr. Speaker.
And I was saying, Mr. Speaker,
The member raised a point about gun and
And he has nothing.
divided and submit to the Governor General
Understand?
reports either showing the constituencies
You have a
to
duty, Mr. Speaker, to address that.
recommend that
Members.
This is unheard of.
Members. Member for number 8, with the greatest of respect.
This is unheard of. Yes, that's what they think.
Members of this honorable chamber. Member for number 8, you will not continue to tell the chair how to behave and what to respond to. Hold 1 second. Right? That's his version. Hold on. As I sit here, I can't validate that. He can say whatever he wants. But what I will say is that if anybody try to stop anybody from coming to the parliament, then that is not correct. That is wrong. Okay? So I've made that clear. But in terms of addressing his particular thing, I have no control over that. Absolutely none. I'm the speaker. Yeah, the point I'm making here is, we're here. We've started the parliament. Both of you made the time about notice. We started parliament after the time you've gotten. You got your stuff. Now hold. Yes.
If it's reference that paragraph 3, section 3, speaking to the form of notice that can be out of the normal form of notice, it indicates, Mr. Speaker, if you will permit me to read, provided that in the case of an emergency of which the Speaker shall be the sole judge, a meeting of the National Assembly may be summoned on such shorter notice as he or she may determine, and such notice may be given to members by such means as the urgency of the case permits.
Mr. Speaker, we are in public business, Mr. Speaker. And if we have an emergency sitting of Parliament, and if we have an emergency, Mr. Speaker, if we have an emergency, Mr. Speaker, if we have an emergency sitting of Parliament, the Speaker has a duty to explain to the public what the emergency is.
Milton, I'm calling you by your name, Mr. Eugene. Member for number 6, have a seat, please. Because I'm naming you. I am naming you. And if I'm naming you, I have ruled on that matter, and I'm asking that the parliament continues. Okay? If you continue along that road, I will have to have you move from the parliament. I am done with that. Continue, member for number 6.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask a question. Very simple question.
Member for number 10. This is not questions time.
I rise to
So go ahead.
And the point I wish to get clarified is the matter of a boundaries change an emergency? Mr. Speaker, if that is an emergency, what is the emergency about changing the boundaries?
Yes.
And I ask that because that is really what I want to ask. What is the emergency? Don't talk about 7 years or 5 years. We're talking about a specific matter. And I would like to have that explained, because otherwise what we're doing here is a travesty.
It is.
Member for, thank you, member for Nevis 10. Member for St. Christopher 6, go ahead, please.
Right.
Thank
As
you.
I was saying, Mr. Speaker, having, of course, given the preamble, I now turn to the schedule of the document, which is part of the draft proclamation that comes from His Excellency the Governor General.
Yes.
1. Electoral
Member for number
constituency of
6.
St. Christopher.
Hold 1 second. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, there are only certain resolutions that can come to Parliament without giving 3 days notice. And this is not one of them. Mr. Speaker, the rule, Mr. Speaker, speaks to what resolution can come to Parliament right away, and the others have to get 3 days notice. This resolution, Mr. Speaker, has not been properly notified to the Parliament to give 3 days. Mr. Speaker, you know the rule, Mr. Speaker. You know the rule. The Attorney General knows the rule. I don't remember Patrice, my member for number 11 knows the rule. So the rule, Mr. Speaker, must be observed.
Member AG.
Mr. Speaker,
AG.
I've raised an important matter.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of which rule.
You're not aware of which rule?
I'm not aware.
Okay, which rule are you speaking of? Which rule are you referring
Which rule
to?
are you referring to? If you tell me, I can
Notice! The rule and notice, Mr. Speaker. Notice of meetings. Notice of meetings.
Mr. Speaker, I continue. Electoral constituency of St. Christopher 1.
Mr. Speaker.
All that portion of the parish of St. George, Bastille, including the town of Bastille,
AG.
to the east of the line running from the sea northwards
Member for
through the center of 4th Street, Victoria Road, and its continuation to the parish boundary.
Right. I will. Member for St. Christopher 6. AG.
Mr. Speaker, I'm still not aware of who they are.
No notice rule?
I don't know what it is. Just tell me the section. I'll find it. Just
What rule is this challenge you on? Because you're making it, so there's a challenge. Do you have
Tell me
it?
the rule. Somebody tell me.
No, but that's a valid challenge. If you don't know, it's a valid challenge.
It is a valid challenge.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, do you know the rule and notice, Mr. Speaker? Notice of meeting.
Member for number 6, continue, please.
I continue. Electoral constituency of St. Christopher 2. All that center portion of the parish of St. George, including the town of Bastille, between a line running from the sea northwards through the middle of 4th Street, Victoria Road, and its continuation to the parish boundary, and a line running from the sea northwards.
Member for 6, St. Christopher 6. Honourable members, have a seat, please. Let me do it this way. Let me take you through school. Back to basics. Honourable member for St. Christopher 8. You're making a statement about the rules.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
All I need you to do is to quote to me which rule, to the Honourable House, which rule you're referring to. Hold on a second. Timothy Harris.
Mr. Speaker, the point, I don't know what
My constituents don't talk like that.
Hold on. AG.
My constituents don't talk
Member
like
for
that.
number 8, we're dealing with basics. Can you tell the chair what specific rules, what specific rule or rules you're referring to?
not mine.
Mr. Speaker, I raised the point of rules because notice in our rules is well known.
Which rule you're referring to? Listen, I'm making it as simple as possible. Which rule are you referring to? Can you quote the rule? That's all I'm asking.
Just say no, Jean said no. I don't know, it don't mean it. Just say no. Jean just said no, I don't know it.
Because you see, the problem here is you're making your statements and you're also pointing your finger at the chair. Saying that I ought to know the rule and I ought to know that. You are raising the objection. You are raising the objection. And can you sit? I'm standing. You are raising the objection with respect to the proceedings and meetings and so forth. And you're quoting the rules. Right? And I'm asking you which specific rule you're referring to so that I can address it, so that the members of the government bench can also address it, because you are raising it. And so that is fair enough. If you cannot tell me what the rule is, let us move on with the people's business.
Mr. Speaker,
as simple as that.
One of the duties, Mr. Speaker, of the clerk in Parliament is to assist the Parliament. And the Speaker. The clerk in the Parliament
And
is
the
assist
Speaker.
Parliament. And I'm raising a point on rules
And the
about
Speaker.
notice, Mr. Speaker. And to assist this Parliament, so that this Parliament does not fall into error, Mr. Speaker, I am urging you, Mr. Speaker, to have the clerk provide the rule, considering this was an emergency notice, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
The rule is
Thank
well
you,
known
thank
about
you,
notice,
thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
One of the
But just
duties-
that, hold on, member from number 6, hold on a second. Just for the record, you still have not told me which specific rule. So, but
No,
AG,
Mr.
can you,
Speaker,
AG, can you?
I don't know which
He has a.
specific rule you're referring
Yes,
to
go
on
ahead.
notice, but there's a rule 29 in your book. Dispensing with notice. Where a motion or any other proceeding of the National Assembly is one that requires notice, such notice may not be dispensed with except with the consent of the Speaker and the assent of the majority of members at the time.
Has the rule been dispensed with?
Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to the House that all we have to do to move on to the point that the Honourable Gentleman has raised is that if the matter can be, if the Speaker has so decided, it has the assent of the majority, we can dispense with that
Speaker,
notice.
the Honourable Member is so helpful because he has now just agreed that the rule is being breached. So he has just agreed that the rule is being breached.
No, Mr. Speaker, with respect.
That's an unfair statement because you could not even say what the rule was.
Yes,
That's an
that's
unfair
what the rule
statement.
is. But I'm saying
That's
if
not
there is the
assumption.
rule, but where is the rule? I'm just pointing it out. I'm trying to be helpful, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah. Anyway, that's member for number 6. I think you have made several attempts. Member
Mr.
for
Speaker, you're not helpful.
I am
You're
now,
not helpful to the Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, I continue.
member for number 8.
Electoral
Member for number 8. I have
constituency
heard
of
you.
St.
I've ruled.
Christopher 3.
Continue. Member for number 6.
All that
My
portion
ruling
of
is
the
the
parish of
proceedings
St.
continue.
George Bastille and Trinity, including the town of Bastille, west of a line running from the sea northwards to the center of Wigley Avenue,
Member for number 6.
and its continuation to the parish
Member for number
boundary,
6.
to Frontier God,
Member
and
for
its
number 6.
extension to French River in the
Member for
parish
number
of
6.
Trinity,
Order.
Palmetto
Order.
Point,
Let's go.
continuing northwards,
Let's go.
etc.
The Honourable Attorney General gave advice as to how we ought to proceed in relation to the matter, that the matter ought to be put to the Parliament for determination. For a determination, we have not had that being put
No.
for determination.
Thank you,
Mr.
Speaker.
Speaker,
Thank you.
it has to be put.
Attorney General just mentioned that point that you were raising a while ago.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure which rule they're speaking about. I'm
The
saying,
very one that you read, AG.
no, I said if there's notice required. I don't know that is because I haven't seen the rule.
But you
I
were
have not
reading
seen
from
the
All
the
right.
No, I
very
read from
rule.
one section. I don't know
Yes.
that it's
Members,
notice.
members,
Yes, but you
notice
have
is
that.
required.
members,
But
If
you
notice
have
is required, we don't
Members,
know. I don't know what you're talking
members, I've
Notice
taken that.
must be required
Members.
for a meeting of the Parliament.
Members,
about. Notice for the meeting.
members,
Understand?
Timothy Harris.
Yes.
Wow.
Seems as though that's all you need to hear. Your name. Members for St. Christopher, member for St. Christopher 6, can you go ahead? And I suggest that you start your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Okay?
Mr.
Go ahead.
Speaker, sir.
I now continue,
Mr.
Mr.
Speaker, sir.
Speaker.
On a point of
Electoral
order, Mr. Speaker.
constituency of St.
Mr.
Christopher
Speaker.
4.
Member for number
point
3.
of
Member for
order.
number 3.
All that
point
portion
of
of the
order.
parish, Trinity,
A
Palmetto,
point of order.
and St. Thomas,
A point of
Middle
order,
Island,
Mr. Speaker.
west of
Mr.
Frontier
Speaker, I'm
God,
on my feet on
and
a
its
point of
extension
order.
to French River,
Member,
I am on my
parish
feet
of
on a point
Trinity.
of order.
Palmetto
member for
Point,
number 6. I believe that this is an abuse. It's an abuse. Right? Now, member for St. Christopher 3, if your point of order is anything that I've dispensed of already, do not raise it. So
This
if
is
that,
a point of order on the procedures of Parliament.
man, but I
Speaker,
told you already dispense
Could you
of that.
hear my point of order?
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker,
Go ahead.
I am saying that we have we have a submission that this resolution needed advance notice.
But I've ruled already.
Mr. Speaker, could you hear this?
But I've ruled.
You're asking.
Hold on.
You're asking.
Member for
You're
3.
asking.
Member for 3, I'm on the floor. Member for 3, I'm on the floor. The rules also say once the speakers dispense of something, that's it.
That's not what the rule says.
That is what it says. Yes, it says that. That's what it says. And you're shouting and all of that doesn't make
That's not
sense.
what the rule says, Mr.
Anyway.
Speaker. And Mr. Speaker.
Anyway, let me make it absolutely clear.
The people's business.
Let me make it absolutely, member for St. Kitts-Nevis, let me make it absolutely clear, right? I will not entertain any further interruptions to do with anything to do with proceedings or meet notice. I've already ruled on them. Let's go, member for St. Kitts-Nevis.
Mr. Speaker.
Have a seat.
This is a parliament that runs on rules, you know.
Constituency.
Have a seat. Have a seat. The man is on the floor. I do not recognize you. Please have a seat.
All that portion of the parish of St. Anne, Sandy Point, to Brotherson Guts in the parish of St. Paul,
Sam Conduct,
and its
have a seat,
eastward
please.
extension to the parish boundary of St. Paul, Capistair.
I'm going to say it one more time. Sam
Electoral
Conduct, have a seat
constituency.
and be quiet. Thank you.
I want to raise a different point.
Timothy Harris, please. Timothy Harris, I'm not. Timothy Harris, I've ruled, and my ruling is I will hear from the member for St. Kitts-Nevis. I'm not going to entertain this any further. Go ahead. I am going to hear from the member
Electoral
for St.
constituency,
Let's go ahead.
St. Christopher 6. All that portion of land in the parish of St. Paul, Capistair, from Brotherson's Gut in the parish of St. Paul, and its eastward extension to the parish boundary of St. Paul, Capistair, to George's Gut, and the parish boundary between St. John, Capistair, and Church and Christchurch, Nicola Town. Number 7, electoral constituency St. Christopher 7. All that portion of the parish of Christchurch, Nicola Town, to Washgut, and its extension southwesterly to the parish boundary between the parish of St. Mary and the parish of St. Peter. Number 8, electoral constituency of St. Christopher.
Sit down, sit down. Have
all
a seat.
that portion of the parish of St.
Sit
Mary
down.
from Washgut and its extension.
I am not entertaining that. I am not entertaining that.
Parish boundary between the parish of St.
I have
Mary
raised that already.
and the
I have
parish
dealt
of
with that.
St. Peter and the entire portion
Eugene
of the parish
Hamilton.
of St. Peter.
Mr. Eugene
Electoral
Hamilton, have a
constituency
seat.
Nevis 9.
Mr. Eugene
All that
Hamilton.
portion of land.
Last point. Mr. Eugene Hamilton. I am asking you to. Mr. Eugene Hamilton. Because I'm naming you. I am naming you. Can one of the members of the government side please move for the removal? Please move a notice for the removal of the member for St. Christopher 8.
Mr. Speaker, having heard you
And
name the member for St. Christopher 8 several
I've dealt with it
times,
already.
I move a motion that in order to discontinue the disturbance and confusion created by the member
Exactly.
for St.
Disrespecting
Christopher
House,
8,
walking, coming and
that
talking
he be
nonsense.
removed so that the House will have
Manners.
order and it can continue with its mission here today.
The question is that the member for St. Christopher 8 be removed from this parliament and this session and shall not be within the precincts of the parliament and this session. Those in favor? Aye. Those against?
Revision, Mr. Speaker.
Revision.
Revision.
Yeah? Just go ahead.
Revision, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
Let's go. Division.
Aston Martin.
Aye.
Honourable Marcella Liver. Aye. Honourable Sam Condo.
No.
Honourable Glenn Phillip.
Aye.
Honourable Sean Richards.
No.
Honourable Denzel Douglas.
Aye.
Honourable Timothy Harris.
No, it's an outrage.
Honourable Mark Brantley. Absent. Honourable Vance Amory.
No.
Honourable Patrice Nisbet.
Aye.
Honourable Jason Hamilton.
Aye.
Honourable Nigel Carty.
Aye.
Honourable Richard Skerritt.
Aye. An elected member. Aye.
For representing the rules of the House.
13. 1, 2, 3.
Member for number 3, you may be next if you don't learn to behave. Respect the house. This is the people's house. And it's not about anything about election and elected or not. It's about respect. You can't come in here and banning some and disrespect in Parliament after the rule says that. I am not speaking to you. I am not speaking to you. Member for St. Kitts-Nevis 3, I am not speaking to you. I'm speaking about the behavior of the member for St. Kitts-Nevis 8. And 7, and you. Number 3. So if you continue and I have to put you out, then I'll put you out.
Mr. Speaker, we had 8 yeses and 4 noes.
The ayes have it. The member for St. 8, kindly excuse yourself from the Parliament and the precincts of the Parliament. Thank you. And that is the rule.
May I continue, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, go right ahead.
I am now down to...
Hold 1 second. You can't continue, and he's in the precinct. Yes. Mr. Hamilton, can you leave, please? Mr. Hamilton, you cannot use the PA system. I'm asking you, officer, can you escort this gentleman from the Parliament, please?
Remove him like a common criminal.
You remember referring to the man as a criminal. You can't do that.
Let's go, member. Let's go, member.
But you're out already. You're out already.
Member for 8. Let's go.
That is why.
Number 8. Follow the rules.
That'll be the biggest mistake you make. What I can do about it? This is my session. That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you. Why would you want to gesture to take the mace? Why would you want to gesture to take the mace? Oh, but you're putting out yourself. Anyway, let's continue the people's business. Member for 6.
I am now down to paragraph 9 of the schedule. Electoral Constituency of Nevis 9. All that portion of land in the parish of St. Paul, Charlestown, and Lower St. John, Fig Tree, commencing at the intersection of St. Paul and St. John Parish boundary, continuing southwesterly along the St. Paul and St. John Parish boundary in a straight line to and along Sulphur Gut to the Island Main Road, then southwards along Prospect Road, passing to Prospect Power Station and the Prospect Community Center to and along Bridge Gut, then passing west of Golden Grove Housing Development, Brown Hill that is, to the sea, then northwesterly and north along the sea coast to the parish boundary between the parish of St. Paul and the parish of St. Thomas. That is Electoral Constituency Nevis 9. 10. Electoral Constituency of Nevis 10. All that portion of land in the parish of St. George and Upper St. John, Fig Tree, commencing at the intersection of the St. Paul and St. John Parish boundary, continuing southwesterly along the St. Paul and St. John Parish boundary in a straight line to and along Sulphur Gut to the Island Main Road, then southwards along Prospect Road, passing to Prospect Power Station and the Prospect Community Center, to and along Bridge Gut, then passing west of Golden Grove Housing Development, that is Brown Hill to the sea, then southeasterly and northerly along the sea coast to the parish boundary between the parish of St. George, Gingerland, and St. James, Windward. That is Electoral Constituency Nevis 10. 11. Electoral Constituency of Nevis 11. The parishes of St. James, Windward, and St. Thomas, Lowland. And that is it, Mr. Speaker. And His Excellency, the Governor General, expects that this will be approved by resolution of the National Assembly, dated, of course, today, the 16th day of January, 2015. So having had the resolution before, Mr. Speaker, read into the minutes of this meeting, I now, Mr. Speaker, would like to have the full support of this Parliament to effect the changes, the realignment of the boundaries as outlined in the schedule of the draft proclamation that has been sent to my office, that is the office of the Prime Minister, by His Excellency the Governor General's office. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
One second. Question is that this resolution be approved as well. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against?
Mr. Speaker,
The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
Yes, sir.
what is this we are doing here?
The question was put.
But how
There
you
was a
can
pause.
put this up when you asked to hold while you speak with the member?
There was.
You asked the member, you are talking to another member there, Mr. Speaker.
Nobody finished.
But how we gonna think until you said, wait, you think, what foolishness is this? You have to give permission to speak. You asked us to hold. You are speaking to the member for Nevis. We are waiting.
Member for
Mr. Speaker.
Member for St. Kitts-Nevis. Member for St. Kitts-Nevis 7.
Yes.
The question was put.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Member.
Mr. Speaker, the question can't be put like that, you know.
Why?
Why is there a need to rob members of the opportunity to debate? You call us for the emergency sitting of the parliament. You engage a member. You engage a member. And you have not indicated that the parliament is to resume, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is an injustice. Mr. Speaker, you can bring members here in an emergency sitting.
I've heard you.
Speak to a member and not give us here the opportunity to speak. What is it we're attempting to do?
Member for St. Kitts-Nevis 7.
You engage. You engage the member. We're talking about protocol. Mr. Speaker. I fell asleep. I rise when you have finished speaking, Mr. Speaker. That is when you rise. You are engaged with a member. You said, wait, you are speaking with him. How could we do anything else, Mr. Speaker? Member cannot get the one to get the attention. You have to get the attention. What foolishness is this?
Member.
What injustice is that? You gone up there just as he has gone. Speaking to you. Speaking to you. What is this? Understand?
Okay. Member for St. Kitts 7, have a seat, please. Have a seat. All right. The member came and he went back. There was a pause. I asked.
Mr. Speaker.
There was a. Yes. Go ahead. Yes. No, can't. No, go ahead, member for Nevis 10, please. Go ahead, member. Hold 1 second. You see that is. Have a seat. That's exactly. You see. Think about respect. You never allow people to disrespect you without your consent. And after you're trying to get my attention, you're using words like kangaroo and so. And I heard you, and that's what you've been doing even in the last session. Let me hear from the member for Nevis 10, and then I will rule, and let's move on. Let's go, member for Nevis 10.
I'd like to have guidance from you, but I'd like to make an observation. I think in fairness, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the procedures of this House, you're having had a conversation with one of the members, for what reason I don't know, maybe to clarify something, and having completed the conversation, I was not aware that there was any indication from you as a chair to indicate if there were any contributions on the resolution. I think, Mr. Speaker, in the environment in which we are functioning this evening, I want to move. I want to say that there was a gap there somewhere. There was something missing. Because I was trying to ask the member to speak, but he was looking at you. No. And I did not get the sense, Mr. Speaker, that you had terminated and that we were to resume any debate or to have a debate on the matter. I didn't get that sense, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what you can do to ensure that the procedures and to ensure that the environment in this assembly rises to another level. Because were we, Mr. Speaker, to terminate this debate on this very important matter of quote-unquote emergency matter, then I do believe that we would have done ourselves an injustice. Mr. Speaker, this is not to chastise or to criticize. It's a matter of let us do what I think would enable us, this assembly, those of us who are sitting here, and those of us in this country, to get an issue of this magnitude properly ventilated and discussed in this Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence on that matter.
Throughout this entire sitting, I could have got up before they could have spoken, Mr. Speaker, because even when persons spoke to the very rules of Parliament and notice, it is only when I actually came in here, I opened the notice in regards to this sitting, which was given to me. I was ready to speak, and you were speaking with the member for Nevis 11. I even turned to the honourable member for St. Christopher 3, and he said to me, wait for the speaker to finish what it is he is doing. And I think, Mr. Speaker, if we look at Parliament, we look at the rules of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, you normally would indicate that when someone is on the floor, even if you're on the floor, persons ought to wait and then speak after. In this case, Mr. Speaker, you have always asked for persons to comply with the rules of Parliament. And here we are complying, waiting for you to finish the conversation which you are having, and then signaling to persons that you're ready to proceed to debate. And that hasn't happened, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact, in some instances, what would happen is the leader of government business himself would look around Parliament and ask the members of Parliament if they are going to contribute anything towards the particular matter, Mr. Speaker, which is before this Honourable House. If we are to be honest, Mr. Speaker, in regards to what would have transpired just now, Mr. Speaker, I do believe that you yourself would have to accept some responsibility because you were engaged with a member, Mr. Speaker. And while being engaged with that particular member, Mr. Speaker, we were waiting, we were holding for you to actually finish that conversation. We were according you the respect, Mr. Speaker, that you have so often spoken about in this very Parliament, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if it is that you want to say that during this sitting you haven't gotten that respect from other members, then certainly I think I should be afforded the opportunity to speak, Mr. Speaker. I have sat here all afternoon, Mr. Speaker, patiently awaiting my chance to speak on this particular resolution. My constituency, Mr. Speaker, is one of the constituencies being affected by the resolution before this very House. And so I came here, Mr. Speaker, with the intention of making my contribution. Mr. Speaker, I do believe that if anyone erred in this particular instance, it would have been yourself
who heard. Because having finished, you asked us to wait, to hold, and having finished the conversation with the honourable member, you did not indicate to us that you are now ready to proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, member for St. Kitts-Nevis 5. Thank you, member for St. Kitts-Nevis 10. I think I've made I'm going to make a decision with respect to the proceedings of Parliament. I actually did indicate to the member to hold because the member for Nevis 11 was speaking to me. He got back to his seat, and then I wait a while, a brief moment, and then I raised the question. The question was raised, and the eyes came up, and then the honourable member for St. Christopher 7 actually started trying to get my indication. Albeit that he's been disrespectful since that and throughout the whole proceedings. I think I'm going to make a decision where we continue the Parliament. I think at the very least, I have given the notice of an emergency sitting, despite your challenges, and my indication that the rules of Parliament speaks to the Speaker being the sole judge of emergency sittings and the method in which members are to be notified. I think that is in the best interest of the country that we continue the debate. And so the member for the St. Christopher 7 has moved, and right. So my question to you is whether or not the member for any members for the opposition perhaps we want to start the debate.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to make a contribution on this very important, in this very important debate of the proposed changing of the boundaries for the upcoming general elections. Mr. Speaker, I want to suggest at the very outset that free and fair elections, which include the arrangement of boundaries, is the cornerstone of the democratic process. It is, Mr. Speaker, indispensable to the democratic process. And so for us to come here, Mr. Speaker, on Friday the 16th of January, at 4:30, well, I think the notice. What is it the notice say?
Member for Secretary 3, make a presentation, please do not go back.
Mr. Speaker, this includes my presentation. Well, I am saying that I'm
asking you not to go back to anything that I've dispensed with. Make your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, my presentation includes my notice to Parliament. It includes that.
Well, exclude it.
That cannot be excluded.
Well,
Mr. Speaker,
member for St. Christopher 3, I am giving you warning. If you speak to that, I'll have you removed from the Parliament. End of story.
The only time I got thrown out of Parliament was when I was making a presentation some time ago.
Thrown out by Pam, you're right.
Thrown out of Parliament is that I was speaking and it sounded like I was reading from a prepared text. And like today, I have nothing. Nothing except what I was given when I came into Parliament. That's it. So, Mr. Speaker was saying that the free and fair elections are critical, indispensable to the democratic process. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that on the question of the change of boundaries for the next general elections, to get a notice this afternoon
Member for St. Christopher 3. Obviously, you are in denial or simply cannot understand what I'm saying. I'm saying, and I think you member for Nevis 10 advise you not to do that. Listen to your colleague. Do not go down the road of speaking of anything that I've dispensed with or of, and also do not disrespect the chair in any way. Go right ahead. Member for St. Christopher 3, this man runs this chair, not you. I heard you. You need to get your act together.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm on the floor, sit down. You need to get your act together. Every time I speak to you, you have some kind of sarcastic and rude statement to make. Whether you make it on the mic or you make it off mic and within my earshot, it's called disrespect. Learn manners. You may continue.
Mr. Speaker, when I come to this house, I come to debate and do the people's business, and I operate according to the rules of the House. I have made it my duty to make sure that I understand how Parliament operates and what is allowed and not allowed. And so I conduct myself accordingly within the rules of the House. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that to come to Parliament this afternoon on the 16th of January, 10 days short of the 5th anniversary, 10 days short of the 5th anniversary of the last election, to deal with a matter as critical to the whole process and procedures of our democracy is really sad. Mr. Speaker, in 10 days' time, it will be the 5th anniversary of the last election. 2 months from then, in March 9th, I think was the date, when Parliament first met after the last election, Parliament would have to be automatically dissolved. And according to the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, elections will have to take place 90 days after that. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm making the point to say that something as critical to the democratic process. Something as important to the democratic process should not be held in such a manner and under such conditions. It's too important.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker,
Fundamental point.
the question of boundaries is nothing new.
Yes.
Nothing new, Mr. Speaker. In fact, it is believed that the last time boundaries were changed was in 1980 or 84. Okay, okay. So the last time the boundaries were changed, you stand corrected, was in 1989. So that's 25 years ago. 25 years ago, Mr. Speaker. And we had a change. In fact, even before I go there, in 1989, when I first became a candidate, there was an election observer mission from the Commonwealth. They met with, well, at least on St. Kitts, both political parties. I'm not sure about what happened on Nevis. But on St. Kitts, they met with the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party and the People's Action Movement. And we have had this kind of discussions about boundary changes. I'm talking about 1989, 25 years ago. Mr. Speaker, and if I was given, well, let me put it another way. If I knew that we were having Parliament here to discuss this today, I would have walked with all the reports. I have them. From since 1989. I met with the members of the electoral mission from the Commonwealth. They were headed then by, the Labour Party was led then by the leader, by the late Sir Llewellyn Moore. There was a change in government, Mr. Speaker, in 1995. In fact, every election since 1989, we have had electoral missions.
True.
Election. And the observations and recommendations, wide-ranging, not only to do with boundaries, but other things, including boundaries, but all kind of other things. From 1989, 25 years ago, I'm aware of, personally. And we have not had any change in boundaries since 1989, even though the observer missions have been saying that repeatedly, election after election. Mr. Speaker, the whole idea, that is why I find it really, really difficult, unpalatable, one might even say outrageous.
It is outrageous.
after having the opportunity for 2.5 decades to come, Mr. Speaker, as some people would say, well, some people say in the 11th hour, some people say in the 12th hour, but to come on the eve of an election.
Don't bother.
Yeah. Just before election, on the eve. On the eve of an election, to try and attempt to change the boundaries. Mr. Speaker, already there are tremendous difficulties, immense difficulties with our register of voters. In fact, Mr. Speaker, that was one of the recommendations, the observations from the observer mission. The whole idea of voter registration and the voter register and all that. And so, Mr. Speaker, as it were, to add further confusion, is really, as my colleagues have been saying, is a travesty. It is really sad that we would want to do that. Mr. Speaker, this country, St.Kitts-Nevis, is known as a country that practices a high level of democracy. St.Kitts-Nevis. That is well known, Mr. Speaker. We have had a tradition of exercising the highest levels and principles of democracy. In fact, Mr. Speaker, our parliament at one time, a long time ago, was held up as a model parliament.
Your sarcasm of putting in that point for a long time ago, I suggest strongly keeping it your opinion, disrespecting the chair. Disrespecting the chair. Can't make that kind of position. How do you prove that? You have no facts on that. You can't prove that just as a loose statement against the chair. Please, I ask you already to respect the chair. Okay? Do not do that.
Mr. Speaker, I am referring...
I don't care what you're referring to. I'm saying do not do that. That is sarcasm at its highest, and I ask you, let me stand. I ask you at the beginning not to disrespect the chair. You agreed. I'm listening keenly. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity at one time. Like I say, a long time ago to visit England when I studied in England. And I went to the House of Commons, the Parliament in England. And I tried to get into Parliament, but you had to have invitations in order to go into Parliament. And
remember what are you speaking on really? Is it
I'm speaking about
honorable member, with the greatest of respect, right? Please, we're dealing with a resolution, right? It's not about the parliaments and the working of parliaments. I mean, let's speak to the resolution. If you have nothing to say, then sit down.
I am speaking about the boundaries. I'm saying it is critical to the democratic process. So is Parliament. So is Parliament.
Go ahead.
How could you speak about democracy and not speak about Parliament? This is the institution. That reflects our democratic process and policies and procedure. It is here in Parliament. Okay, sorry. No, I was just, okay. No. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Speaker, Parliament is essential. I'm talking about democracy.
Remember, I'm getting the impression that you're stalling for some sort of time or something. We're speaking about the resolution. I'm going to be very specific. If you're not speaking about the resolution, let's move on. I'm going to be very tight on that. So let's go. Speak to the resolution, otherwise sit down.
The resolution is to do with boundaries. Yeah. I began by saying the boundaries is important to free and fair elections.
Absolutely.
Which is indispensable, critical to the democratic process. That is what it is about. That is what the debate is about. Elections, Mr. Speaker, is the manifestation of the people's will. And the people must be given a free and fair opportunity to do that. And so I was making the point, Mr. Speaker, that we cannot come here at the 12th hour after 20 years, Mr. Speaker, of overseeing the boundaries. Made no attempt, Mr. Speaker, to change them, and on the eve of an election, on the eve of the elections, on the eve of the elections, to have boundary changes. That, to me, Mr. Speaker, is unacceptable. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are saying that something as critical as this should be given widespread discussion. In fact, more should be done than that, Mr. Speaker. The whole electoral process, Mr. Speaker, needs to be reviewed and revised and revamped.
Isn't that what the resolution is speaking to? Same.
This resolution is speaking to reviewing the electoral process.
Anyway.
And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying that this basically is an outrage. This is too important a matter to be done in this indecent haste.
Member for St. Christopher 3 again.
So why the emergency? Why the emergency? Why the emergency? You can't have your cake and eat it.
And so, Mr. Speaker, boundaries, the elections cannot and should not be done like this. Should not. Mr. Speaker, we should pride ourselves in a democracy where we have elections that are free and fair, and that we have the total involvement and participation of all the people eligible to be taking part in those elections.
This doesn't compromise that.
This, Mr. Speaker, like I said already, with the difficulties that we are having with the electoral list at present, the register at present, is going to further complicate the election process and procedure. Mr. Speaker, this, as it were, is like sneaking this thing through the back door. Already, Mr. Speaker, we have a report that was signed only by the members on the government benches.
Everyone got an opportunity. Everyone got an opportunity to sign it. Is that new? Every single time it happens. Every single time it happens.
And so, Mr. Speaker, we begin with some controversy and dissatisfaction. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the boundary report, the previous boundary report, Mr. Speaker, was challenged. The one before this one was challenged and found to be null and void and of no effect. The boundary report before this one. And what the government did, Mr. Speaker, instead of addressing the issues and concerns that were raised. They went and hastily and clandestinely get another boundary report that they know will not stand the test of time. And so it is done in this manner and this fashion in order for the government to get its way. This isn't something that this country could be proud about. This is certainly not something that we could be proud about. And Mr. Speaker, there is no need for this kind of behavior and conduct. No need. No need for this kind of behavior and conduct. We are supposed to be striving, Mr. Speaker, on a daily basis in terms of enhancing, of promoting in the first instance, but of enhancing our democratic process. Not making it the subject and the object of ridicule. This is not what this is supposed to be about. Mr. Speaker, democracy is not only important in terms of the political process, but in terms of our economic and social progress and development. The values and ideas of democracy promote a healthy society. And it's something that we should aspire to.
Yes.
It should be the total involvement and cooperation of all the citizens. That isn't what is happening here, Mr. Speaker. That is not what is happening here. And this is not good.
How many times are you going to say the same thing? Now, let's move on now. I mean, I've heard that several times. You have made that point. I've heard it. Let's move on. Repetition. Let's go. Get some substance in your debate. I've heard it. I mean, how many times are you going to say that? You only need to say it in French now.
Boy, history is not going to be kind to us at all, boy. History is not going to be kind.
I just say us.
Not going to be kind to us at all. What
Just
is
say us.
this? What is this? So, Mr. Speaker, everything
Thank you.
this is like a Black Friday, boy. This is like a Black Friday. The only thing it isn't the 13th. This is like a Black Friday. This is a blot on our democracy. A blot on our democracy. This isn't anything that we are going to be proud of. I think when this chapter is written, it is going to have, people are going to not be very kind to us. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would want to place on record, I would want to express and record my abhorrence, disgust, disappointment with what is taking place here. Really, really sad.
Taking place where?
In Parliament.
Meaning?
In the country. What is happening today, Mr. Speaker, is not good.
You've said that already. You said that a million times.
I could say it as often as I like.
Yeah, but... No, no, no.
I could.
No.
There's not...
No.
And so, Mr. Speaker, I am really, really disappointed that we could come to this. Mr. Speaker, the whole idea, Mr. Speaker, of having boundary changes
Go ahead, member.
Yeah.
Member, I think I've heard you. Can you move on to make your presentation with respect to not being repetitious?
So I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that for us to come in this manner and this fashion to change the boundaries is doing an
Remember, you have said that
injustice.
already. Remember, you have said that already about 8 times. I mean,
For us to come, Mr. Speaker, to change these boundaries in this faction is doing an injustice. Mr. Speaker, boundaries, according to the Constitution, involves so many things. It says that we want to equalize the inhabitants as far as it's possible. Mr. Speaker, in fact, I think it was pointed out. Right, okay, good. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, according to the Constitution, it says, and I quote with your permission, Mr. Speaker, that all constituencies shall contain as nearly equal numbers of inhabitants as appears to the Constituency Boundaries Commission to be reasonably practical. But the Commission may depart from this rule to such extent as it considers expedient to take account of the following factors. That is to say, Mr. Speaker, the requirements of Rule 1 and the differences in the density of the population of the respective islands of St. Kitts-Nevis. The need to ensure adequate representation of sparsely populated rural areas, the means of communication, geographical features, and existing administrative boundaries. Mr. Speaker, you notice it did not say anything about overseas voters. But, Mr. Speaker, that has to be a consideration.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the member is misleading the House. And he has done it several times for the evening, but I think that I need to stand and to signal to this House that it is grossly misleading to say that overseas voters and other such things should be taken into consideration. The schedule, the relevant schedule of the Constitution speaks to those matters that ought to be taken into consideration. They are enumerated. Right? They are enumerated in the Schedule 2 of the Constitution dealing with the realignment of boundaries. The consideration is inhabitants,
and you may depart from that for geographical reasons and other such things, has nothing to do with overseas voters. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Mr. Speaker, if you are dealing with the inhabitants, I believe you're dealing with people living on the island. And so, Mr. Speaker, if you want to make them equal in terms of inhabitants, and you're drawing the boundaries to make them equal in terms of inhabitants, and then you find, Mr. Speaker, you have some maybe 5,000, maybe 20% of your voting population not living in the
has nothing to do with any voting population. It is people, inhabitants who are represented by elected representatives. Children.
Persons abroad who are not part of the population.
Children. Inhabitants we're talking about. Has nothing to do with voters.
Well,
has nothing to do with voters.
It has to do with voters.
Where you see that in the Constitution?
It has to do with voters. Be practical.
It's all in your head.
Be practical. Psychosomatic.
Right, remember for number 3.
Has nothing to do with voters, and you know that. You're smarter than that, but not so smart.
So yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying that, of course, boundary changes are necessary and should be done. But I'm saying that it should be done
since 2004.
Should be done since 1989.
It was done then.
Well, 1995. 1995.
You promised us in 2004.
1995.
You set up by Massey's house.
1995. So, 20 years. And so, Mr. Speaker, to come to change the boundaries at this time like this is doing us an injustice. Like I said, there are other considerations that we need to do, we need to take into consideration in terms of addressing this matter. This is too critical to the process to be done like this. And so I am suggesting, Mr. Speaker, that this effort to change the boundaries is an effort at manipulation and further an attempt to hang on to political power.
That is what it is. That is at the heart of it.
And so this should not be allowed.
That is at the heart of it.
This should not be tolerated.
That is the heart of it.
Should not be tolerated, Mr. Speaker. Even if we, and I'm sure we all agree, that we need to have change in boundaries. But we are saying, Mr. Speaker, this must involve a whole review and revision with the total involvement of all the people in this country. It must be done properly. It must be done properly. This is unacceptable. And we are saying that this effort needs to be reviewed and looked at. And it is clear, Mr. Speaker, if people were convinced and satisfied and believe in what they were doing, we wouldn't be here at this time, this hour.
True. Sneaking in.
If people were satisfied and convinced in the rightness of their cause and what is happening, it would not have been done so. People would have been able, this would have been able to stand the test of time.
Yes.
And to be defended. But that's not what we're seeing.
Member for St.Kitts-Nevis, I think you've made your presentation. You haven't added anything new.
Mr. Speaker, I think
unless you're going to, because you're making the same points over and over. You're saying it different ways.
Mr. Speaker,
same point.
Mr. Speaker.
If I'm speaking, if it's that you intend to do to stall and whatever, then that's not going to work. Can you just make your points, new points, and let's move on?
Mr. Speaker.
Well,
I will just speak.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. Yeah. I'm not going to respond. I'm going to speak because I'll just speak.
But don't go over any points that you went over before.
Mr. Speaker,
okay,
there's nothing in this rule that will tell people how to make their presentation. Okay, but nothing in the
but
rule.
I can stop you. The chair can stop you. No,
if I am out of order.
Well, repetition is out of order.
Repetition is not out of order. Repetition is for emphasis. There's nothing like that in the rules.
You're stalling, man. You're stalling for time.
Nothing like that in the rules. Nothing like that in the rules.
Yeah, go ahead.
The man can't be wasting the house time. The man is an elected member.
You are wasting the country time.
Longer than you will be. Longer than you will ever be.
And so, Mr. Speaker, we are saying that what we need is a sincere and genuine effort. A sincere and genuine effort of addressing this fundamental problem. And that is part of my responsibility, my obligation to the people of my constituency and to the people of the country. And that's what I'm doing. How could we, Mr. Speaker, in good conscience, come at this time with all the difficulties and challenges that we have concerning the electoral process, the electoral officials, the appointments, the way things are done, to further complicate these matters. What are people trying to do? This is not aiding and promoting democracy. This is further undermining. And that is not good, Mr. Speaker, in the 21st century. It is not good.
What is not good? What is not good?
What's happening here?
Member for St.Kitts-Nevis, I think you have reached the end of your presentation. Can we have someone from the government side make, as is customary to sing? Yeah, say it again? Yeah, but it's time, it's, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker.
That the
debate... I recognize the member for St.Kitts-Nevis. You had a chance to speak. Yes, go ahead, member.
You have just
go ahead, member.
Over on that side, Mr.
Debate
Speaker.
on this matter.
Member for St. Christopher 7. The rule says that the speaker is the one, the chair recognizes who is to speak. Yet hold on. I just ruled a while ago on process and the steps that I made. I'm ruling again on the steps that I've taken. Point I'm making is that I ask that you discontinue your presentation because you're making no new points. And I ask a member for the government to make a presentation and to address the House. Member for St. Christopher 6 is on the floor. Go ahead, member. Go ahead, member, please. Go ahead, member for St. Christopher number 6.
I rise to make a motion that the debate on this resolution before this Parliament be brought to an end, and that this matter be put for voting.
That has to be the most outrageous.
Question is that this resolution be approved as read. Those in favor? Those against?
Mr. Speaker,
The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, you are denying members of the House their right to speak. It is an outrage, Mr. Speaker.
The adjournment.
It is an outrage, Mr.
Clap.
Speaker.
Clap.
To abruptly end the Parliament like this. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. You're disrespecting people.
Yeah, the question is that the resolution be approved as read. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Speaker, you have persons here wanting to speak. What we are having here is an outrage.
Member for St. Kitts 7.
Outrage,
Adjournment, please. Yes.
It's an outrage. Mr. Speaker.
No, Mr. Lloyd. Speaker. Clerk, sorry.
It's an outrage.
He took up your time.
Clap, let's go.
You can't stop the debate of the Parliament like that.
Member for St. Kitts 7.
That can't be right.
Timothy Harris. Timothy Harris.
Can't be right.
Timothy Harris. Can you have a seat? Clerk is on the floor. Clerk, go right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek your leave to.
This is a sham, Mr. Speaker.
Stands adjourned.
This is outrageous. This is
This honorable
outrageous.
stand adjourned. The question is that this honorable house stand aside. Those in favor?
And the people must deal
Those
with this
against?
matter. It's
The
outrageous.
ayes have it. This honorable
You
house
sit
stand
in the
adjourned.
chair
Sign it
and
up.
behave like that. You lost all sense of independence. It's a shame. Shame. Shame and scandal.
Where's the officer? Officer, can you get this man out of the precincts of Parliament, please? I don't want him nowhere near me. Thank you.
Douglas. Prime Minister Douglas.
Fellow citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, earlier today, the Parliament of St. Kitts and Nevis, the National Assembly, met in emergency session to debate the draft proclamation that was laid before it pursuant to the provisions of subsection 3 or subsection 5 of section 50 of the Constitution of St. Kitts and Nevis. That draft proclamation was approved by a resolution of the National Assembly today, Friday, the 16th day of January, 2015. Subsequently, the draft proclamation with accompanying resolution was submitted to His Excellency, the Governor General, and a proclamation in terms of the unamended draft was eventually gazetted today, the 16th day of January 2015. As a result of all that, I hereby now announce that I have advised His Excellency, the Governor General, to dissolve the Parliament. To dissolve the Parliament, the National Assembly of St. Kitts-Nevis, effective today, the 16th day of January, to give effect to the proclamation which has realigned the constituency boundaries of St. Christopher, St. Kitts and Nevis. I further announce that the date of the general elections for the Parliament or National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis will be announced later. God bless you. Thank you.
How much of a victory for you and your administration?
The victory is to come in the elections.
Deputy, are you anticipating any action that could try to delay the boundary changes?
Lord, we in this country, especially in politics, expect anything from the opposition, but they will not prevail in winning the elections for the National Assembly here in St. Kitts-Nevis.
When are you likely to announce the election?
Just hold your breath and you will know.